stay that little bit better.
I hope they go 0-12, lose every game by 50 points.
I just hope they don't have to drop out of SEC. I'm not sure it's right to. You're going to
Good.
That's what I saw you do. He's really certain. But he's got peace of mind now.
I know he's bored out of the line.
Well, I don't know, he's working pretty good in the office.
Well, he's back from the TV, get right out.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead.
Good thing that he's not there.
I'm checking that right now.
Yes, it's on. Just real low.
This is very hard for me to hold a microphone because I talk with my hands. I forget that it has to be by my mouth. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start with announcements so that we have plenty of time for Beryl's presentation and questions. We're gonna kind of try chronological order here. So, the next big thing is the 4th of July. Our parade starts at 4 o'clock. If you would like to be in the parade, there's still room for you. You need to contact Amber Russell, and if you need her phone number, or Mark Presley, who's here today, he can take care of you. I hear that he is also looking for any type of convertible vehicle, cars, Jeeps, to drive some of the dignitaries through the parade, cheerleaders, our grand marshals, etc. So if you have a convertible type vehicle or know of anyone who has one, send them to Mark. The parade does start at 4, music in the park follows directly after, which is about 4:30. We have several music acts lined up. We have Aaron Moreland is gonna open us up, and then we have Dustin Spears, Super Sport, and then the community band followed by the fireworks. All along in there, we have vendors selling a wider range of things. We have clothing, jewelry. I'm most excited about our food vendors this year, so come hungry. We have everything from catfish and kettle corn to ice cream to Italian ice to hot dogs and chips, so you'll not go hungry while you're out there. The chamber will be sponsoring the Dunkin' booth, and if you've not been, the Dunkin' booth's a lot of fun. Paul has been modifying it, so hopefully it works a little bit better. And our star attraction in the Dunkin' booth will be Warden Washburn at 6 o'clock. So, if you have a thing or two to say to the warden, you can say it with your money and your little softballs there. The fireworks, of course, we have the community band right before fireworks. Fireworks are at dusk, 8:30, 9 o'clock. There's also going to be a cakewalk at 5:30 for the Band Boosters fundraiser. And each of our music acts will start on the hour and play for about 40-45 minutes, but then the Band Boosters have worked really hard, and they have some really huge raffle items this year, big trips and nice things. So you will have to buy your raffle tickets, of course, but they're pretty reasonable. Once we get through the 4th of July, we're gonna move on to our next chamber meeting, which will be August 6th, I believe, the first Tuesday, and that will be our annual meeting. So today you will notice orange, mostly orange slips on your table. You are asked to vote for 3 people to be our new board of director members. So if you will do that today, we can get them counted and everything ready for next meeting. We will recognize our retiring members and introduce our new board members in August. Plus we have a live auction, and it's just, basically it's a party for us. It's a lot of fun. We have great food, we have a live auction, and immediately following that, we will kick off for the Trousdale County Fair. You have a flyer for the truck bike show swap meet. That goes on during the fair. So the fair is August 8th to the 10th. This takes place on August 10th, Saturday, and it's a fundraiser for the backpack program. So be sure to come out, enjoy the fair, all the stuff we have, and we'll hear more about the fair at our August meeting. Now, I will take community announcements, since I think I've remembered everything I'm supposed to say. John? You always have a community announcement. I always pick on you while you're chewing your chicken.
The Historical Society meeting will not be this Saturday, but next Saturday. I forgot what day in June that, July it is, but anyway. Speaker will be a gentleman from Red Bowling Springs who's going to talk about the old resorts in Red Bowling Springs. He's written a book about it. His name is Don. I have his name somewhere. Anyway, real nice dog. So at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Archives Building. And remember, all Historic Society building meetings are open to the public. You don't have to be a member to attend. Glad to have you there.
Okay. Do we have any more announcements? Yeah, you can go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Hey, it's Antonio Young, actually with the U.S. Census Bureau. So it's that time of the decade. So we're coming up to ramp it up for the 2020 census. It's starting, really it's ramping up now. It's going to go till September of next year. Because what happens after we finish, that data has to be on the business desk December of 2020. So again, it's something that's been every decade since 1790 and is going to continue. So it ramps up nationally, usually anywhere between 400,000 and 500,000 employees are temporarily, applied or hired for the process. A lot of people think of the quote door knockers or the census takers. That's part of it, but that's not going to be until really April of next year, and those are for non-responders. So just really putting this out in the communities, at the library. I have a PDF and JPEG version, so if anyone gives me their email, I'll be happy to send that to them. Just get it out in the community. And we are hiring, pays approximately, if they're working in the community, $15 an hour, 58 cents a mile reimbursement. A lot of that's auditing or just driving to verify addresses, things like that. So I just want to make that available and just to let you know, for every 100 people that don't participate in the county, the community is losing $1 million. It works out to about $10,000 per person. That's not counting. So again.
On each table, there's a little thing from Hartsville United Methodist. In the fall, mark your calendar, September 7th, we're going to do a pig roast and a live auction, and we're hoping it'll be a fun community event for everybody.
Okay, Chris?
Coach Satterfield wanted me to mention the Yellow Jacket Golf Classic coming up on July 20th, 8 a.m. at all the golf course. Golfers, and if you don't play golf, I'm sure you can buy a sign and support the event. July 20th.
The Christmas for Kids Cakewalk will also be Saturday, August 10th. Part of the fair, it'll be in the high school auditorium, so we're gonna have it inside this year so you can walk without sweating to death. We do need cake, so anybody knows anybody that likes to bake, feel free to get in touch with us.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Just a little bit more about the backpack car show. My friend Brian King and I got recruited to try to help this event this year, so we decided we were going to try to grow the event by 30%, which is huge. I'll be taking up donations after the meeting. Anybody that would like to contribute to the door prize program or make a contribution directly to the program itself is seeking after me.
Anyone else have a further announcement? Okay, if not, we are going to go ahead and turn it over to Senator Farrell-Head. We thank you for coming out to the smallest part of his district, Trousdale County.
Do I need this? Do I need the microphone? No. Okay, good deal. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's always enjoyable coming to Trousdale County. I consider myself more aligned here than I do the other side of my district, which is Nashville, metropolitan Nashville. Have a little strip there in Davidson County and Hermitage and Old Hickory and Percy Priest. But I certainly identify out here much more. John, I want to tell you, I certainly enjoy your articles. I read those every week. So I do keep up a little bit of what's going on in Trousdale County. I am part of, I believe it's 8 chambers that I belong to, so it's hard to get around to all of them on a regular basis, but I appreciate very much you having me up here and the opportunity to speak to you. Our slide show is not going to work, so Had quite a bit of information. It's, the visual on that probably would help me walking through to help you catch what I'm talking about, because I had a lot of figures. I serve on finance and administration, so there's a lot of numbers. When I make presentations, I go back to our budget a lot, help folks understand where your tax dollar is going to. Serve on education. Clint's certainly very interested in that, and also serve as vice chair of health. And being a pharmacist, well, I certainly have a lot of interest in that. And we have a representative of the health department here to check whatever I say that my facts are correct today. So we'll watch that. And I serve on rules of the Senate, which is quite a good place to be, because if there's some things taking place and not proper, then you have a forum to talk about that and get that straightened out. And I also serve, and just the country boy come to town, but I serve as Speaker Pro Tem of the Senate. And the Speaker, Lieutenant Governor, allows me or asks me to preside quite often, and I really enjoy that. And every now and then I have to bang the gavel to get everyone's attention. They'll get to talking and not paying attention and listening to who's speaking at the time. So that goes back to those rules they get to do. Give you just a little bit of, recently Tennessee has been announced as the #1 most stable state in the nation. And that's a really good place to be. The #1 most stable. And that's based on several things. One is that we balance our budget, but there's a lot of states that balance their budget. So it's not just unique with that. We also have something referred to as the Copeland cap, which says if we spend more money than we project coming in revenue, then we have to acknowledge that. You actually can do that and still have a balanced budget, but it worries, that's not what you do. And you would have to spend out of reserves to do that. And we normally have reserves going forward every year. If you'll notice, the revenue income is, we are about $500 million at this point in time, or for last year, we were $500 million, which ended 2 days ago. A little over $500 million over projected revenue growth. So that's $500 million that hadn't been spent, that wasn't in the budget. Goes into reserves, it goes into next year's budget. It can go into rainy day fund, those type of things, but it can be used to balance the budget for next year. So you could actually spend more than you anticipate coming in and use what we're over this year for next year. But if we do that, then there's a statute that says we have to acknowledge that we're doing that. So when you have to sign on, we're acknowledging that we're spending more money than we've got coming in. That kind of slows that process down and makes us a more stable, financially stable state. Other things that come into play, rainy day fund. We put more in the rainy day fund this past year than ever before. We're up to $1.1 billion. When I went in 7 years ago, we were about 300,000. We've gone through the recession and spent down the rainy day fund. It's taken a long time to build that back. We need to get to about $1.4 billion in reserves in the rainy day fund. We're at 1.1, so we're on our way to getting it. That adds to that stability that folks look at. We have a AAA bond rating that lowers our interest, so we're paying less money on interest. We've had no new debt for 3 years. I tell that when I go to different seminars where other states are gathered, and I say that, they just can't believe that because they borrow money all the time. Our roads are debt-free. We pay as you go. A lot of folks, most of their federal money for roads go to paying interest of what they've already spent. And Tennessee is not doing that. Our retirement system is 90 to our Tennessee employees. It's 95 to 98% funded. We're in the top 3s in the nation doing that. Give you an example of how strong that is. I hate to do this to Kentucky, but Kentucky is funded at about 34%. And that's a real problem in Kentucky. They're gonna have to raise taxes, cut services, or not pay retirement. That's the choices that they've got. And there's a lot of other states. Illinois is worse. So all those things add to that stability that makes Tennessee #1 and very much an envy of other states in the nation. We're also the lowest tax state in the nation per capita income. And in this past year, we passed an additional $45 million in tax cut, professional fees. A lot of folks we had, I'm gonna pull occupations out, but we had like hairdressers or beauticians having to pay $400 a year as a professional fee. And so we eliminated about 20 occupations on that. That's been a real thorn in a lot of folks' eyes. 15% professions. Continue to phase out the hall tax if you get in your retirement. You get dividends, and then you've been paying an income tax on that. That's slowly being phased out in 21, I believe it is. A total since 2011, we've cut $845 million per year in taxes. On the same token, as we talk about that, well, before I go back to that, we talked about the debt per capita in the state. The average state has a debt of $3,500 per person. The federal government, our debt per person is $67,000. And that figure does not include what Social Security is looming out there and Medicare is looming out there. That's not included in that $67,000. Tennessee's debt per capita is $922. Again, just a great place to be financially stable. The budget this year is $38.5 billion. That's up about $700 million, I think it is. Of that, the state has 18.6 of your actual state tax dollars, 18.6 billion of that 38.5. And then the federal is 14 billion. So we utilize federal funding quite a bit in our state budget. There's some folks that are critical there. Why do we take federal funding dollars when we have such an outstanding $1 trillion, $23 trillion debt? But until they disincentivize that, we're going to continue to utilize that for funding Tennessee. So that's a little bit on the financial. Our dollars do reflect our priorities. In education, out of that $38.5 billion, education's over $11 billion. TennCare is over $12 billion, and DCS, mental health, corrections, human services, almost $6 billion. Transportation is $1.5 billion. Those four categories, take up over 80% of the budget. Doesn't leave a lot of money, Mayor, to do other things that you want to do. But we've continued to attack education as far as increases on that. I told you how much money we've reduced in taxes. We've also increased spending for education that same amount, close to that same amount during that same time period, and continue to increase teacher salary at $500 million a year. So we've put our money where our mouth is on concerning education. I wanted to break this down. Again, I'm going to turn this around. You all can't see that. There's no way you can see that. Of your state tax dollars, taking the federal dollars out, just your state tax dollars, out of every dollar, 41 cents goes toward education. Again, priority toward education. Health and social services is 28 cents. Transportation is 6 cents. Law and safety and corrections is a dime. General government, what we operate government on, I think this is really a good figure, 3 cents. 3 cents out of every dollar. Only know of one nonprofit that operates on that little capital. Does anyone know what that is? Is there a Rotarian in the room? Rotary. Rotary is the only organization that operates on less money as a nonprofit than what Tennessee works on. I think that says a huge amount for our state. So what do we do in 2019? Let me stop right here. Don't know how much time, I've got a lot of information as I've already thrown, but if you got questions, stop and ask me. Any question along the way, I may cover what you want to talk about and I may not. So at any point in time, just speak up and we'll address whatever's on your mind. We did a block grant application this year for 10K. Let me tell you what that means. That doesn't mean that we're going to a block grant. All that meant was we want to have some discussion about things. And there are parameters put in the bill that says if there's increasing expenditures and population, a disaster, then we're still covered as we would be under the current 10-care program. Another thing that it said was that if there's a contract negotiation is made with the federal government on a block grant, it still has to come back to the General Assembly to be approved. There's no approval for the block grant by the state. All that we did was say, let's talk about this. Let's have this discussion. Is there a better way to provide health care for Tennesseans than what we're doing? Is basically what that is about. Katie Beckett waiver, we did that, $27 million toward that. Katie Beckett, does anyone know what that is about? Does anyone know what Katie Beckett is? I met with a young lady that, and part of her family from Hendersonville before this session started. And this is a young lady and her husband who are not on TennCare, have private insurance, and their medical bill after insurance with co-pays and deductibles is over $1 million. They have a child severely severe health issues. They're in and out of the hospital, in and out of the emergency room, just a huge problem. And there's no avenue for help for them except one thing that they can do to get that child on TennCare: divorce. Now you stop and think about that. And so we passed a bill where that we're going to start taking care of those children in that situation. Excuse me. This is a type or a form of Medicaid expansion. And my personal opinion is if we had done normal Medicaid expansion, we would not be able to do this. But we felt like that this was critical, that we should take care of these children. And you've got two groups. You've got the ones that are severely disabled, handicapped, medical issues, and then there's some that just need some respite care. The parent needs to be able to go to the beauty shop or the grocery store or the church or whatever. And so there's help included in that. There is federal matching dollars on this, just like in any Medicaid expansion. My personal opinion is we haven't set aside enough money for what we think that's going to do. That's not what the fiscal folks that crunch all these numbers said. My gut feeling is we're going to have to come back and address this with additional dollars. Safety net, which is your local clinics, one at Westmoreland, you've got one in Gallatin, scattered around. We put, the governor put 2 million in, we put 1.5 additional in for $3.5 million for that safety net program where those programs can continue. Intellectual and developmental issues, disabilities. 7 years ago, we did not cover any of those folks. These primarily are for families who've taken care of adult children, and now they're in their 70s and 80s, and we have begun helping that group of individuals, those parents, where that those children, adult children are taken care of, had not done that prior to 2011 at all. Mental health transportation, law enforcement, heavy law enforcement in the room. There's a real issue with transporting mental health patients that show up at ER rooms. And the Sheriff's Department have not been being reimbursed for that transportation. We're now covering that. There was a real issue for the Sheriff's Department. This is not a complete solution to that problem, by the way. We're going to have to continue to address that because you've got guards, you've got policemen in ER rooms staying 24, 48 hours while they try and find a bed for these folks. A lot of them are not threats, but we're treating them like they are a prisoner. And we've got to deal with that. It's a real tough, thorny issue. Health Department may have some comments there. Opioid prescribing, we passed a bill, and I carried that bill 2 years ago for the governor, Haslam at that time, putting roadblocks in that process, and I spoke with you concerning that. We came back and adjusted that some. I felt like that we really had some folks that were not reading the law and following exactly, and we had some chain pharmacies that were not being compliant. You hate to change the law when somebody's not compliant, but that's kind of what we went back and did. We eased that just a little bit, continued those speed humps, but what was not being utilized, we took out and we streamlined that. Hopefully that will help that situation where the patients that are hurting can still get medication, but we put those speed bumps on the road to addiction. And by the way, the number of prescriptions being written and the number of pills being dispensed is down drastically since this law passed. What is not down is the amount of opioid deaths that's occurring. And if you think about that, the reason for that is that we've had so many folks previously addicted to opioids, it's going to take a while for that curve to catch up with the prescribing. I talked about the education budget a little bit. We did put civics in this year on that. I can't tell you how many folks I have that call my office or call me and say, when you're in Washington, I want you to do so-and-so. You know, I don't go to Washington. I'm in Nashville. And they just don't recognize and understand our political process and what civic government is about. And so we felt like that this was important to put this back in. It may give our director of schools over here some heartburn trying to get it in his schedule for the students, but we felt like that was important. There was also a lot of concern about pre-K, the portfolio assessment, and we wrote in where that there could be a variation on that. You have some options now that you didn't have.
But it's still required.
Yeah.
But it's still required.
Still required.
It just is that the portfolio can have different models.
Right, right. There are a couple of other well, you're probably not interested in that. There was a budget amendments or kind of, it's not, doesn't require legislation, but there's requests for appropriations. Probably doesn't affect Trousdale County very much, but there's a Comer barn, if y'all are familiar with that, between Hendersonville and Gallatin. It's in disrepair, and Sumner County is looking at putting a lot of money into making that an event center. And we thought we'd kind of stir that pot a little bit and put a little bit of money, if they matched it, toward that, so that it's a regional type of effect. We, 2 years ago, completely rewrote the adoption law. As many of you know, I'm an adoptive parent. We completely rewrote that law, got tremendous positive response to that. We came back with a post-adoption agreement contract, which says that if the biological and the adoptive parent make an agreement, the biological parent can see the child Christmas, Easter, birthdays, once a month, whatever that agreement might be. You can put that, you can have a post-adoption agreement that's signed as soon as the adoption's signed, stating that and putting some teeth into that where that falls through. That gives a lot of biological parents that are willing to surrender their child some comfort that they will continue to be able to see their child, even though they may not be able to raise them. We are adding 5 new safe baby courts. We already had 7. We're adding 5 more, which is like a drug court within a court. And what we're hoping to do there, what we are doing there, is we're able to surround these families where children are in DCS custody, if the judge so chooses, where these courts are in place. Surrounding those parents with services, rather than seeing the judge once a month or once a quarter, they're seeing them weekly, and they got folks around them. And what we're hugely successful. It may be transportation, it may be education, it may be drug help on drug abuse. It could be just parenting. It's amazing how many parents, they don't have any parenting skills. They didn't grow up with any parenting skills. So what we're able to do is, in a huge, better than 99% of the cases, is that okay, let me back up here. I'm getting you confused. In 50% of the cases, that child or children goes back into the custody of the biological parent. And in better than 99% of the cases, the child does not come back into state custody. So that's a win, first off, for the child, most important. It's a win for the biological family, and it's a win for the taxpayer. The other 50% of the cases, the biological parent comes to realize, I can't raise this child. And it's usually because of mental issues, mental health, or drug abuse issues. And so this post-adoption becomes very important to them when they say, all right, I'm here to surrender my child. I can't do that. I can't raise them. They've been in contact with the foster family during this time period, gotten to know them and feel comfortable with the way the child's being raised, and realize that the foster parents can do a better job than they can do raising the child. So normally nationwide, it takes 3 years for a child that's in state custody to get them to a permanent home. I want to stop just a minute on that. There's an ACEs study, which is adverse childhood experiences. Chronic adverse childhood experiences in a home that's dysfunctional, then the development of the child's brain is hindered. 80% of the child's brain develops between 0 and 5 years old. You take 3 years out of the child's life with chronic adverse experiences. Then your reading level's going down. in 3rd grade. 20 years from there, you can predict that there's going to need to be more prison beds for this population. So it's all downhill with this if we don't turn this around. Okay, I said nationally it takes 3 years to get a child out of DCS to a permanent home. And these courts are doing it in 9 months. Gives me chills just telling you that. Now that is a win for children, a win for our society, a win for the biological and the adoptive parent, and a win for the taxpayer. So I've been a sponsor of that and proud to continue doing that. We reduce regulations, and when I talk about reducing regulations, a lot of folks think, all right, air quality's going down and all that. It's not what we're talking about. To be a hair braider prior to yesterday in the state of Tennessee, braiding hair, not coloring hair, not cutting hair, braiding hair, you had to take like 100 hours of continuing education. You had to pay a huge amount of money, I've forgotten whether it was $100 or $400 to get a license to braid hair. Really? We did away with all that. You know, I think it's 10 hours of education, but those type of regulations stifle entrepreneurship, they stifle our economy, and it protects a few certain individuals. And so we try to open that up. We look for those type, when we talk about reducing regulations, that's the type of regulations that we're looking to reduce. We did eliminate the statute of limitations on sexual childhood abuse. Okay, 3 things here. Sports gambling passed. I didn't vote for it. No, didn't vote for it. The new handgun permit, where you don't have to have actual physical demonstration of using a gun, you can get a permit by answering some questions online. Thought it was a horrible bill. I didn't vote for that. Passed. Daylight savings time. About 80%, 90% want to go to full-time daylight savings time. I did vote for that. Now, the kicker is that the federal government has to okay it. And they are not known to move quickly, and I do not anticipate that that will happen until there are other states around us, where it's not just we're singled out. It's going to need to be Georgia and Alabama and Kentucky and Missouri and different states around where there's not so much confusion. So this fall, you're going to get to fall back again. Next spring, you'll get to spring forward, and that pattern will continue for a few years, is my prediction on that. Questions? I've talked a lot. Yes, sir.
About hospital closings.
There is, certainly that is taking place. Even with the analysis is that even if Medicaid expansion had taken place, that would not save our hospitals. It's very much like I live in Gallatin and our folks want to go where? Nashville, because it's better. Well, it's not better, but that's perception. And that's throughout the state. You have that perception that the regional, the bigger hospitals are better equipped, and so folks want to go there. We don't have the transportation issues. I was up in Coffee County or Grundy County, I'm not sure which county, and that hospital up there has closed. And what they did was they repurposed that building. They put in clinics, did a lot of different things there. They're actually serving their population much better than they were. They had, I'm pulling this off the top of my head, John, so don't quote it in the paper. Like 11 patients was their average load or something like that, and with Medicaid expansion, supposedly it might have gone up to 14. You can't keep a hospital open on 14 beds. You know, that's the issue they've got. They've got more people. They've got enough people to support the hospital if they would support it. They don't. And so I think I've been appointed to it's a southeast, southern regional states. There's 14, 15 states, and I've been appointed to a committee to look at what we can do for this on the health. And so that is certainly a huge issue. I do like what Coffee or Grundy County has done up there in serving their population. What we want is health care for folks, the best health care that we can give. And that's part of this, looking at this waiver. You know, whether that goes through or not, I don't know. Even if they approve it, do we vote for it to utilize it? We don't have the answer to those questions yet. But I am anxious to work with other states and see what they're looking at, both those that have expanded Medicaid and those that haven't. So we've got a well-rounded group of folks looking at that. Yes, sir.
With regards to education funding, we've probably learned more about the term fiscal capacity more in the past year than any of us probably ever cared to. Is there any chance of getting some help with that, or at least getting something where if another big something comes to Trousdale County, we don't get another big old bite out of our budget?
I'd love to answer yes to that question. My gut feeling is that will be very difficult. I won't say it won't happen, but if that takes place, I think that the entire BEP funding formula will be changed. And there has been lawsuits in the past before I got there, and there were agreements between the rural counties and the cities and how the money was funded for education. And this was an agreement that no one was happy with, that was settled on an in-between model. So there's resistance of going in and dealing with that. I'm not saying that's right, I'm just telling you, I think politically where we are is that there's going to be a lot of resistance in opening that can of worms back up again. Do you disagree with that?
I totally agree, because when you study the history of education and funding in Tennessee and how it's progressed, to get to the present funding formula where we are with BEP, that's 50% TASER and 50% CPR, has been a compromise in this place where everybody has seemed to like land the plane. And I think, like you said, opening that can up again would be hard to get people to do, and more difficult to get them to agree to any changes as well.
Yeah, I think everyone has, and this is I'm surmising here. I don't know this, but I think that everyone feels like that if we say we're going to open that up, then we're going to wind up in a really big fight and not get back to where we were.
Right. And the last lawsuit around 1985, 86, that funding formula gave more money to the rural school districts, because there was some inequities there. That's why I think people are afraid to open it up, that the rural districts could get less the next time.
I think that's a real possibility. You've got some places like Memphis, in particular Shelby County, that you hear this conversation going on down there, and you know what they want to do.
And they have a lot of legislators.
Yes.
Which kind of is a segue into my next question.
Okay.
I thought the voucher bill was a bad bill, for which I didn't vote for either. The governor's putting $25 million more new money to support that voucher bill for the next 3 years. I understand.
Goes past that.
It goes past that, even beyond. Well, that was kind of my next question is once the voucher bill has been installed, has there been any consideration about taking part of that money that's been found to support school vouchers and only to LEAs in the state of Tennessee? Has any talk or consideration been given to try to take that money and bring that into the BEP in future years?
has not been in the BEP, but it's going to priority schools.
No, but what I'm saying is in the future.
Right, in
Once
the
once the ESAs have been installed, you know, cause that was like seed money from what I got. Would it be in consideration of bringing that money maybe back permanently and bringing it back into the BEP?
The way it's written is the 3 years, then after 3 years, all that money goes to priority schools anywhere in the
I got you,
state.
okay, I got you, okay. So it
It's a
does,
permanent, so it's not in the BEP, but it goes toward the schools that are hurting the most.
that's good to know.
Whether it's your school or someone else's.
But
And
it's
I-
directed toward the kids?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I tell you what I'm looking at, in fact, I had a short discussion this morning. There is a organization out of Utah called Turnaround. But they turn around schools, these low-performing schools, and they guarantee it. Or they don't get their money. I don't know of anyone in education that's doing that. There are some other firms like them. So we've got to write a bill. But I'm thinking of that $25 million. Before, there was no funding for this, really. But if we could, and let me tell you what they say. What they say is, we'll come into your school. We're not gonna replace you. We're not replacing principals or teachers. But we're there as mentors, hands-on mentors in your school that is in the lowest 5% performing. And we'll guarantee you after 3 years that we'll have your students up to a certain level in math and reading. And we will only take some of our money on the front side. We'll take most of it once we meet this guarantee. If we don't, we may ask for an additional year to try and reach that guarantee. Well, I'm not, Director, do you know of any?
The only guarantee that I've ever known that somebody was fulfilled was Joe Namath in Super Bowl III. That's the only one I know.
Yeah. I think it's worth looking at. I'm interested in that. They've got my attention. And they have good results from the states that they've been in. But we'll see. We'll see. Yes, sir.
I don't know what y'all can do with unsolicited sales calls,
Oh.
phones. And what really wears me out is when
I got one since I've been here.
When I get a call, we're ready to help you pay off your student loan. I don't have a student loan. I never had a student loan. And then the ones push 7 for more information, push 4 to be taken off the list.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. They just add you on. Do not.
You know,
If you get that, hang up
Don't
immediately.
take the
well,
bait.
I take the bait, so.
Yeah, hang up immediately.
Just to try to get the money. I don't have a student loan either, but I was trying to get the.
Yeah, just, they're offshore, even the ones that are in the States, by the time you get to them, they've shut those lines down and gone someplace else. It is, everybody has looked at that and tried to figure out what to do to stop that. I promise you, I can show you on my phone, I got one. You know, here's what I do to that. Of course, they don't come back and call the same number. Sometimes they do. I've added all those to wrong, where that I know when that number comes in, don't answer. And I'm in a position where, do I answer this or not? You know, well, this says it. I tell you what really gets me. Call from Farrell Hale. Really? Have y'all gotten any of those? Not from Farrell Hale, I hope, but I bet you have. Yeah. So, no, can't help you. Sorry, wish I could. Yes, sir.
How the results on roads, you know, we had all these projects and everything. I know some of them are, I don't know what how's that?
Let me go to Trousdale County first. The connecting with 10, that's numbers.
141.
141 is not up yet. Okay, they had a 3-year work plan.
Right.
And that That
And
is
that's
not.
what I'm trying to figure out, how
Yeah.
that first year going, so to speak.
The first year's going great. They have done, for my district, it's not even in my district. It's 109 south of Gallatin, on the other side of the river bridge. They, were gonna do that in 2 sections. After the Improve Act passed, they put it into one bill. They're gonna have that thing open, 21, which is huge. Of course, they'd already had the property and everything, but it wasn't even on the agenda to start construction. And so they've really moved quick on that. There's some, I-65 is on the board in that 3-year. That will probably be at the end of the 3 years when they start that. But I've been extremely pleased with the projects, and that's all across the state. That's been.
Well, that's sort of what I wanted to confirm. I hadn't heard anything negative, but it's like, well, what is a scorecard? You know,
Yeah,
you know, we're
they're doing
on
real
track.
well, yeah. 386 Vietnam veterans will get, is in that 3-year plan. I wish this was, but it's not, but I'll continue to push for that, and I anticipate that to fall in. The ones, when that bill passed, these projects were in statute, which is highly unusual. So they've got to do those, that's got to be there. Thank you, my time's up, Pat.
Okay, we're gonna draw for our door prizes, but first I want to remind you to please vote